Have you ever felt a presence that seemed more real than the world around you? I'm not talking about a dream, nor a distant memory, but something alive, intense, that touched you in a way no other moment in your life has. A moment when time seemed to stand still, your body felt weightless, and all that existed was an energy you couldn't explain. Maybe you've experienced something like this. Maybe you're here now precisely because you're searching for answers, and I understand. Because that's exactly what happened to me. It was a critical moment. My body, there, motionless. My consciousness wavering between here and the other side. And then, in the midst of that silence that seemed eternal, I felt something, or rather, someone. A firm, warm, real hand, as if saying, "I'm here." But it wasn't just the touch. It was the message that came with it. The voice was familiar like a childhood hug. And then, with a calm that pierced my chest, he said, "Not yet." That was it. 2 words. But they echoed as if carrying centuries of meaning. If you've ever lost someone special, you might understand what I'm saying. Sometimes life seems to find subtle, yet powerful, ways of showing us that there's something beyond. And when that happens, everything changes. Our perception of death, spiritual signs, and even the purpose of life. What if I told you that, in that single instant, everything I believed about the end fell apart? That simple phrase, spoken with such certainty, opened doors I didn't even know existed. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover now may surprise you. This story isn't just mine. It's about reunions, spirituality, divine signs, and perhaps about something you yourself are experiencing without realizing it. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because to understand what happened in that moment, we need to go back in time a little, back to a day that, on the surface, seemed like any other. Nothing indicated that something extraordinary was about to happen. I woke with that vague feeling of exhaustion, as if the night hadn't been enough to restore anything inside. It wasn't physical pain. It was something more subtle, harder to explain, as if the body were present, but the soul was a little distant, observing everything from the outside. It was one of those days when the world outside turns at a normal pace, but inside us, everything seems suspended. I walked, answered messages, feigned normalcy, but something inside me was different. A silent restlessness, like an echo in the back of our mind that insists on calling for something we can't yet name. It wasn't exactly sadness nor anguish, but it wasn't peace either. It was the middle ground. That gray area where the soul searches for meaning, where the invisible begins to approach the visible, and we're not yet aware of it. In my body, a strange lightness, not of relief, but of absence, as if something were being displaced, removed, or prepared. I remember the cold sensation in my feet, even in a warm room. My breath was shallow. My mind was trying to stay focused, while my heart clung to a memory that insisted on surfacing, the face of someone who was no longer here. And it's curious how, in these moments, time seems to stretch. Each second carries a weight it normally doesn't, and even without understanding why, my gaze sought the sky, not as if in awe, but as if searching for an answer, a sign. I was alone, at home, an ordinary day, but with that screaming silence. And it was there, amidst scattered thoughts and hesitant breathing, that I felt the first change, a kind of numbness, as if I were being disconnected from the present. And then came the fall, not to the ground, but into myself, as if I had passed through an invisible veil, and the physical world faded into the background. I found myself in a place without time, where there was neither fear nor haste, a space where the body no longer ruled, where consciousness seemed expanded, a kind of sudden disconnection, but without pain. Maybe it was a faint, maybe an emotional breakdown, maybe something more. Science may give it different names, but no rational explanation could convey what happened next, because it was there, in that suspended space, that something manifested. Not a vision, not a hallucination. It was real, a presence that filled the room, or whatever that place was, an energy field so intense it could almost be touched. And even without seeing it with my own eyes, I knew. Someone was there, someone I knew, someone who had already left. There was no fear, only a deep surrender, a welcome. And then, the hand, that hand, safe, warm, human, touching mine with a firmness no dream could simulate. It was as if, for an instant, all the chaos of the world dissolved, as if everything had stopped for that encounter. And before I could ask, rationalize, or try to understand, he spoke. in the most serene voice I'd ever heard. "Not yet." That was it. 2 words, but with an impact that pierced every part of me. And in that instant, something inside me changed. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what happened after that touch and those words was something no life manual could have predicted. The sensation was strange, and at the same time, extremely real. Everything around me began to dissolve into a dense, almost liquid silence. There were no longer the ordinary sounds of the house, nor the ambient noises, not even my own breathing. It was as if every noise in the world had been turned off, one by one, like when you turn off the lights in a theater and the stage becomes nothing but expectation. Everything receded, like echoes from a place I no longer belonged to. And in that instant, I had the distinct impression that I was leaving my body. But it wasn't a shock. It was a detachment, something gentle but completely out of the ordinary. It was as if matter had become too light to contain my consciousness. I saw myself, or rather, perceived myself, at another point of perception. I wasn't seeing with my eyes. I was feeling with my soul. My mind knew something out of the ordinary was happening, but there was no panic, no pain, just a strange, profound welcome, as if an invisible portal had been opened, and I was being taken to the other side of the curtain that separates what we see from what really is. The lights became blurry, almost non-existent. There was no defined form in the environment, yet at the same time everything seemed incredibly vivid. My consciousness was expanded, and my body was just a distant reference. I wasn't sure where it was, but I knew exactly where I was, at a point between 2 worlds. It wasn't a dream, and I knew it with absolute clarity. Nor was it a hallucination, because lucidity was so present, so conscious, that I could perceive every micro-sensation, the heat around me, the slight magnetism in the air, a different vibration, as if I were immersed in a frequency from another dimension. On this threshold between what we call life and what we avoid calling death, everything is paradoxical. There's a silence, but it communicates. There's a darkness, but it doesn't frighten. There's an absence of time, but there's a sequence, almost as if I were outside the clock, but within a perfectly aligned narrative line. And in this almost dreamlike scenario, something caught my attention. A soft light, not coming from outside, but growing from within. It was as if my very essence was becoming visible. And then, once again, that presence. It was still there, as if it were accompanying me on this journey, unhurried, unpressing, just guiding, just holding. And it was at that point that a part of me began to question what exactly was happening. Had I died? Was this a farewell? Or was it just a pause between 2 states of consciousness? But before I could even fully formulate these questions, a new wave of understanding came. Not in words, but in a feeling that pervaded everything. It wasn't time. It wasn't yet. That experience, surreal as it seemed, carried a clear message. Something had been interrupted for a reason, a greater purpose, an unfinished mission, a learning process in progress. And when this clarity touched me deep within, as if echoing through every layer of my soul, I realized that this was more than an encounter with the unknown. It was a reunion with myself, with parts of myself that had been forgotten, with memories, choices, old promises. Everything was there. It was as if this moment outside of time was giving me back the truth I had lost amidst the routine, the rush, the automatic. And it was there, between the suspension of the senses and the expansion of consciousness, that I understood there is much more than what we see. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the moment that followed wasn't just remarkable, it was transformative. Everything around me seemed suspended in a time that no longer corresponded to the reality I came from. The sensation was of being in a space between 2 worlds, as if each second lasted a sacred eternity. And it was in this almost ethereal setting that it happened. The presence that had previously revealed itself only in energy or sensation finally materialized before me. It wasn't a theatrical apparition. There was no spectacle. There was something far more powerful. Truth, pure and complete. An indescribable calm pervaded the entire space, as if that place, wherever it was, knew exactly what was happening. And then I saw it, not with the eyes of my body, but with the eyes of my soul. It was him, a familiar, beloved face, lost in time and found again beyond it. There was no doubt. There was no fear. It was like returning home after a long journey and being welcomed by someone who has never forgotten you. The environment around us was of a moving simplicity, without defined forms, but with a beauty that no landscape in the physical world could replicate. It was as if everything there had been designed to heal, including the atmosphere itself. The light was soft, enveloping, and vibrated in tune with the silence that spoke more than any words, a welcome so profound that it made the weight of everything left behind disappear. And then he looked at me, a look full of stories, full of memories, full of understanding. That look reached across time and said, "I know." There was no need to explain what I was feeling. He knew. He knew the emptiness, the unanswered questions, the longing tearing at my core. And it was at that moment that he extended his hand. A simple gesture, but with the power to realign everything that was out of whack within me. When his hand touched mine, there was no shock, no fright. There was peace, as if a forgotten part of me had finally returned to its rightful place. The words that came weren't many, but one, in particular, echoed with a force that not even time can erase. Not yet. And the way he said it, it was as if he were reminding me of something I already knew, but had buried beneath routine, pain, and loss. Not yet. It wasn't a negative. It was a purposeful warning, a call to presence, an invitation to reconnect with what truly matters. There was an ancient wisdom in that moment. It wasn't just about me. It was about a greater truth, about cycles, about decisions that still need to be made, about a path that still needs to be walked. I felt that this spiritual reunion wasn't a reward nor a punishment. It was a reminder that we are being guided even when everything seems chaotic, that there are eyes watching us with love even when we think we're alone, that there is a plan even when everything seems meaningless. The most striking thing wasn't seeing him there. It was realizing he'd always been there, that even physically absent, his spiritual presence never ceased to manifest itself, in dreams, in memories, in the signs the heart understands before the mind. And now, it all made sense. That gesture, that phrase, that touch. It was as if he were saying, "The journey isn't over yet, but you are being accompanied." Because sometimes, what we need most is not answers, but memories of who we really are. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because it's impossible to forget the exact moment he said those words. Not yet. Just 2 words, but spoken in a way that seemed to carry the weight of an entire existence and the lightness of a liberating truth. There was no rush in his voice, no coldness, no forced mystery. It was as if he'd waited for the exact right time to say them, in the right tone, at the right moment. His voice was calm, yet firm. It held a warmth that came not from the sound, but from the intention. And that intention in itself spoke volumes. The strangest thing is that, at the time, I couldn't respond, because somehow my entire body grasped what my mind was still trying to translate. It was as if everything was suspended. Space, time, thought. Not yet. What exactly was not yet? Wasn't it time to leave, to give up, to fully understand? It was more than a warning. It was almost a code. One of those messages that goes straight to the soul, without stopping at the rational level. And that, for me, was the most impactful. The intonation of the sentence also left no room for fear or confusion. Quite the opposite. It was spoken tenderly, as if holding someone at the exact moment when everything seemed to be falling apart. There was a quiet compassion there, but also a clear reminder. You have something to accomplish, something that is yours alone, something that, however painful it may be now, is part of a greater plan. The feeling was of being confronted with a hidden truth being revealed in a simple yet powerful way, and that, in itself, is a kind of healing. In the following days, or maybe weeks, I'm not sure, that phrase echoed within me like a bell ringing deep in my chest. With every decision I had to make, every moment doubt tried to overwhelm me. It returned. Not yet. It was as if he remained with me, even after that experience, guiding me from within. And this completely changed the way I began to look at my choices, my pauses, my unanswered questions. Because often, we're in a rush to understand everything, to resolve everything, to move forward as if it were an obligation. But this phrase made me realize that there are processes that only reveal themselves when we accept the right timing for things, when we understand that silence also speaks. That waiting also teaches. That pause is also part of the journey, and most importantly, that not everything that seems like an end is truly the end. Maybe the not yet I heard is also the same one you're hearing now, in other ways, through a dream, a sign, a memory, an inexplicable feeling. What if it is? What if this pause in your life, this doubt, this feeling of not belonging, is precisely the universe saying, calm down, you're not done yet. We're always trying to find meaning in big things, but sometimes it's hidden between the lines, in the gentle messages, in the invisible encounters that change everything from within. And that's why this phrase stuck with me, because it restored a sense of purpose I didn't even know I'd lost. It made me return with a different mindset, with eyes more attentive to the details of the journey, and with a more conscious presence of what truly matters. Sometimes what we need most is not a definitive answer, but a subtle reminder that there's still something ahead, something worthwhile. Because maybe that phrase, not yet, is for you too. And maybe, just maybe, it's what you needed to hear right now. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what happened immediately after that encounter was no less impactful. When the phrase, not yet, faded into the air like a soft echo, I felt everything around me lose its clarity. The light surrounding me began to slowly fade, like when the curtains close at the end of a show. Only this time, I was the stage itself, the audience itself, and the actor as well. Everything went dark for a moment. Absolute darkness, but not frightening. It was more like a veil closing between two worlds. And I was coming back. The transition was strange. It wasn't like waking from a dream or emerging from a distant thought. It was more like being pulled back into a body that no longer felt entirely mine. Suddenly my breath returned with a heaviness. My lungs felt like they were gasping for air, like someone resurfacing after being submerged for too long. The sounds around me were distorted at first. Muffled voices, a high-pitched whistle, the suppressed cries of someone nearby. I felt a strange chill, not on my skin, but inside. A kind of shock between what I had experienced there and the concrete reality that awaited me here. I cried, not from pain, not from fear. It was a silent cry, as if my soul were processing what had happened. And as confusing as everything seemed at that moment, monitors beeping, people saying something I barely understood, lights too white on the ceiling, there was a certainty there, as if a mark had been engraved on me. I came back for a reason. That sentence didn't come from outside. It came from within. It was as if my very essence repeated, firmly and sweetly, the same certainty that presence had left within me. It wasn't time to leave. Not yet. Something here still needed my presence, my voice, my listening, and that gave me a new perspective on everything. Because returning wasn't just opening my eyes, it was awakening with a new perspective. I saw the faces around me differently. I listened to the words more attentively. I felt the texture of life as if for the first time. Even the touch of the blanket on my arm, the smell of the room, the warmth of the tear on my face. Everything felt like part of a great, silent revelation, as if existence had granted me another chance, and now it was up to me to truly honor it. The transformation wasn't immediate, but it was profound. It began as an internal breeze, a shift in mindset, in the way I perceived time, encounters, and the small decisions of everyday life. It was no longer about completing tasks or blindly following a routine. It was about presence, about meaning, about seeing the behind-the-scenes aspects of ordinary life with new eyes, because something inside me had been touched. And when that happens, you're simply never the same again. And you know what's most curious? Life started showing me different signs after that. Small things, but they carried a sense of, I'm on the right path. A glance caught in the street, a phrase strayed from a book, a memory that appeared out of nowhere with a clear message. It was as if the entire universe was whispering, you understand. And that changed everything. Perhaps this is the greatest impact of living an experience like this. The awareness that each moment here has a value that previously went unnoticed. That being truly alive isn't just about breathing. It's about feeling deeply, living with purpose, loving with intention, and that each new day brings with it an opportunity to continue this journey with greater clarity, more lightness, and more connection. Comment, this makes sense to me, because sometimes all we need is to remember that coming back is also an act of mission. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because that short phrase, not yet, continued to echo within me long after I returned. At first glance, it might seem like just a negative, a simple, it's not time yet. But the truth is, when it was accompanied by that calm gaze and that meaningful presence, everything changed. It was as if there were hidden layers to that message, as if the not yet actually carried a greater revelation about my existence, about the journey I still need to complete here. I spent days trying to understand. And the more I reflected, the more I felt that sentence had been a call. Not a call to go, but to stay. An invitation to see life from here with a new awareness, as if there were something or someone who knew a purpose I myself had forgotten. And that made me think, how often do we walk around lost, stuck on autopilot, unaware that we are being called, subtly, silently, to awaken? Not yet can mean so many things. It could mean that your mission is still underway, that there's something only you can do, a word only you can say, a gesture only you can offer, and that despite everything you've been through, there's still a profound reason for your presence here.
A reason you may not yet fully understand, but which little by little begins to reveal itself through small signs, unexpected encounters, intuitions, synchronicities that defy logic. This kind of message, when it comes from a plane we can't see with our physical eyes, often has an impact that transcends the rationale, because it's not about understanding with the mind, it's about feeling with the soul.
What that voice conveyed to me in that moment when time seemed suspended was that there was a larger cycle in motion, and that, somehow, my part in this cycle still needed to be lived, built, and delivered. This made me rethink a lot of things within myself, my priorities, my habits, my way of seeing people. You know when something changes your mindset so intensely that it feels like you've reprogrammed everything from within? That's exactly what it was. I began to look at my days as if alert to a hidden truth about to be revealed, as if, at any moment, life would give me another clue as to what that "not yet" really means. Is it about healing something? About teaching someone? About making peace with some part of myself? Or is it simply about living with more presence, more surrender, more gratitude? The truth is, this phrase, despite seeming like a temporary ending, is actually a portal, a reminder that the time we still have is a gift that comes with purpose, that comes with direction, even when we don't yet understand the full map. And it's curious how, after an experience like this, ordinary things begin to carry meanings that previously went unnoticed. A touch, a hug, a silence shared with someone. You begin to realize that life is constantly speaking to you, in gestures, in feelings, in repetitions that, if observed closely, reveal a language that is not spoken, but felt. That's when we understand that there is a greater intelligence behind the scenes of this journey. Perhaps this "not yet" is also an invitation to transformation, for us to reconnect with what is essential, to realign our compass and walk with more intention. Because while we are here, we still have something to accomplish. And if we are being reminded of this in such an intense, spiritual way, it is because there is a loving urgency in this call. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the true impact of that experience didn't end when I returned. In fact, it was there that a new phase of my life began, a phase in which every detail, every sensation, and every thought took on a new weight. It's strange to say, but I felt as if I'd been rebooted from within, as if that encounter, that touch and that phrase had unlocked something that had been dormant within me. In the following days, there were no parties, no lights, no great external revelations. What changed was my perspective. I began to perceive life with a clarity I hadn't had before. Simple things like the way the wind touched my face, the sound of the rain hitting the window, someone's gaze meeting yours amidst the chaos. Everything seemed to contain a message, a presence, not in an exaggerated mystical sense, but as if there were truth hidden in the details. And this began to transform my mindset. Before, I was someone who lived too caught up in tomorrow, in pressure, in obligations, in fear of failure. But after that, "not yet," a different feeling came over me, as if now were all I really had. And that's not just a pretty phrase, it's a true internal shift. I started making more conscious choices. I started saying no to what no longer made sense. I started saying yes to what brought me closer to my truth, even if it was uncomfortable. And you know what's most curious? Over time, some signs began to appear. Coincidences I'd previously ignored began to make sense. Words someone said out of the blue that answered exactly what I was feeling. Dreams that seemed to continue conversations I'd never finished. Intuitions that guided me to places and people I needed to meet. I'm not saying I became enlightened, far from it. But my faith, which had been somewhat forgotten, grew stronger organically, naturally, like a flame rekindled when no one else believed there was any fire left. This transformation didn't come from reason. It came from surrender. from accepting that not everything needs to be explained to be true, that there's a dimension of life that we only access when we stop fighting the invisible and start listening to it. And when you allow yourself to live from this listening, even if silent, even if imperfect, something inside you changes. And this change, little by little, changes what's outside as well. Your attitudes, your energy, the way you position yourself in the world. I started to value people more, to express my feelings with more courage, to look at difficult moments with a different kind of patience, because now I knew there was a bigger picture, that what seemed like chaos was often just a nudge from fate to wake us up, to remember, to align ourselves. And that changes everything. It changes how you work, how you love, how you take care of yourself. This experience showed me that no matter how lost we get, there's always a way back, and that this path often begins with a simple phrase, a sign, a touch, a presence. And if you're open, attentive, and receptive, you'll realize that this reunion with your essence may be closer than you imagine. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because even after all that, even after the reunion, the phrase and the return, something remained, a bond that wasn't broken, a presence that, from time to time, continues to manifest itself, no longer with the same intensity as that first moment, but in small details that carry an absurd power. And that's precisely where the mystery lies, in the subtle gestures, in the coincidences that touch deeply, in the signs that seem too innocent to ignore. There was a time when I was going through a difficult period, the kind where you wonder if you're really on the right path. I felt overwhelmed, somewhat disconnected from everything, with the feeling that life was passing me by. That day, out of nowhere, a song came on the radio, an old one, the kind he always sang softly when he thought no one was listening. And it wasn't just the melody, it was the timing, it was the lyrics. It was as if he were there, reminding me that I was once lighter, more connected, more true to myself. In that moment, I felt a peace I couldn't explain, the same calm I felt in that experience, the same embrace. Days later, I saw someone on the street who walked exactly the same way as him. And that, again, froze me for a moment. Not because I thought it was him, but because my body reacted before my reason. My heart recognized the gesture before my mind could say, that doesn't make sense. And that's the point. Maybe these signs aren't meant to make logical sense. Maybe they're emotional reminders, silent codes between souls that remain connected, even on different planes. The other day, a child turned to me and said something that completely shattered me, something he used to say when I was little, and the child didn't even know me. It was in a random place, in a situation with no context, but that phrase came with the same intonation, the same tone of firm affection that he had. I could have ignored it, of course, but I chose to believe it was just another gesture, and that choice brought me peace. It made me feel less alone. It's funny how the universe, when we're paying attention, communicates in ways we never expect. It could be a scent that suddenly appears, a word someone blurts out unintentionally, a dream that seems to continue an unfinished conversation. And sometimes, it's precisely in these fragments of everyday life that the greatest spiritual revelations happen, because it's not about living in the past, nor about obsessively searching for answers. It's about allowing the presence to live on in a light, symbolic, meaningful way. And this continuity is what transforms me most. Knowing that the bond no longer depends on the physical, nor on concrete proof. It feeds on sensitivity, on listening, on the openness to perceive beyond the obvious. And when you enter this state of subtle listening, of conscious attention, it seems like the whole world begins to speak back to you. Nature changes tone, people become more transparent, events gain layers, everything expands. So today I allow myself to receive these signs, even if they come in forms no one else understands, even if they don't make sense to outsiders, because I know what I feel, and what I feel is real. It's love translated into details. It's care that overflows from the invisible. It's the continuity of a connection that will never be broken, even if our bodies no longer touch. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because after everything I've shared here, every sign, every detail, every transformation, one last question remains that won't leave my mind. One of those questions that can't be answered with logic, but with presence, with listening, with soul. What if someone you love was trying to tell you something right now? Would you know how to listen? Maybe the sign doesn't come in the way you expect. Maybe it's not a clear voice or a grand apparition. It could be something small, almost imperceptible, a sensation, a shiver, a word uttered in the middle of an ordinary conversation. It could be that dream that seems so real you wake up with tears in your eyes, not of sadness but of reunion. It could be a butterfly that insists on flying close to you on the very day you most needed a sign of life, or that song that starts playing when you're silent, wondering if you're alone. The truth is that when we open space within ourselves, the invisible finds passage. When we silence the noise of the world, what was once a whisper becomes a clear message. The universe, or perhaps life itself, begins to align in an almost magical way. And in this alignment, everything changes. The way you approach your decisions, your relationships, the value of time, your perspective on the present. You no longer want to just survive. You want to live with intention, with depth, with soul. And perhaps this is the greatest gift of these spiritual encounters. Not the confirmation that there is something beyond, but the reminder that the now is already sacred, that every breath can be a prayer, that every choice can be guided not by fear, but by the hidden truth that pulses within you, the one the eyes cannot see, but the heart recognizes. The journey doesn't end here, because from the moment you accept that these signs exist, and that they are for you, everything takes on a new layer of meaning. Pain becomes teachers, silence gains a voice, and longing becomes a bridge between worlds, between planes, between what was and what can still be. Because love knows no distance, and the presence of the one who departed lives on in you. Comment there. I also receive signs, and if this video touched your heart, subscribe to the channel. There's still a lot we'll experience together here.